if you've ever seen all the opportunities that I've received using my bachelor's degree in communications, you'll know that I'm an expert in not using things. So basically, who better to talk about all the chord voicings that you're not using that you already know that are really easy, okay? So we're just gonna actually do some of the most basic chords you'll ever understand, all in the key of C. There's really just 6 main chords in the key of C that everybody starts out learning. And honestly, I think we don't use the easiest versions of these chords to start out with, which is something that we're gonna start changing right now, and just kind of using basically really easy chords to start exploring up the neck on the fretboard, okay? So if you don't know, the chords in the key of C are C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, and A minor, okay? So let's take a really common chord progression, like a C, A minor, F, G, okay? You've probably seen this all the time. C, A minor, F, G, okay? So the first thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna start replacing one of these chords with a different version of it down the neck, all right? I wanna focus in on that F major chord. It's because it's the chord that everybody has a hard time starting out with, really kind of like understanding, getting their fingers around it. But if you can make this C major, you already have more than you need to do to root this in a different location, right? So the first thing that I want you to just kind of memorize at this point is thinking of the 8th fret on the A string as being an F, okay? So right here, this is an F note, just like the first fret on the E string is an F. This is just like the next octave higher. So anytime we root a C major, you might already know that your ring finger is on the C in that chord. We can just move that all the way to the 8th fret. So a C shape right here is going to be kind of an F. Now, the interesting thing about this, we have an open G string and open E string, so really technically you'd call this maybe like an F major 9, something like that. But I think the idea of it is just being able to use the open strings to help us out, because open strings, E, A, D, G, B, E, are all going to be in this key anyway. So we can just start using the core basis of shapes we already know to explore into and beyond, all right? And just like you know that, you know, an F major bar chord starts here on the 1st fret of the low E string, 2 frets higher is where you'll find your traditional G chord voicing. We can do the same thing here, using a G. The 10th fret on the A string is a G. Put that same shape right there. Now, before we get into more robust versions of this, I want to kind of simplify exactly what we're doing. If we have a C major chord, really what we have is the root note, C, and its major third. You get that from the C major scale. Don't want to get too far into that, but basically we have these 2 notes, a C and a E. Really, that's kind of all we need to kind of get the gist of a major chord. So doing that right here, I think, is a great way to kind of get into different, you know, shapes and understanding scales a little bit more. But again, what fret on the A string is the F? The 8th fret. So we can kind of get F in its major third, right? And then the G would be 2 frets higher than that. So if we want to have these little mini 2-note chords, C, F, and G. Now they're always going to be the same distance apart. That's the thing that I really want you to understand. Because, so alright, we have the 3rd fret to the 8th fret, or 5 frets higher. That's the difference between the 1 chord and the next major chord in the key. And then 2 frets higher than that is right there. Okay, so maybe in your mind, depending on how you want to learn it, everybody learns a little bit differently. Some people think of numbers, some people kind of just like kind of feel it out by distances, 2.5 steps being 5 frets. However you want to think of it, be like, all right, I'm in this key, 5 frets higher than where I am. Is going to be the next version I can use here. 2 frets higher than that, those are all my major chords. Maybe I'm in the key of D, right? 5th fret on the A string is a D. I can think of, all right, well, plus 5 frets, 2.5 steps, however you want to look at it. 5 to 10, that's going to be my next major chord, and that's my next major chord, right? So it's a D major, it's 4 chord, and it's 5 chord, okay? Now, that's just the beginning of it. You can start to build off of this, right? If I've got that F, that 8th fret on the A string, I think something unique that we could do, and one chord that I really don't see a lot of people using as a substitution, aside from myself, is this guy right here, which I think is a really pretty kind of chord voicing of this. So I've got my F, my major third, and then its major 7. So this is an F major 7 chord voicing right here. Okay? Root, major third, major 7. 8A, 79, G. Okay? Now the difference between that and the 5 chord is like this, right? This is just a different way that we can add the 7th note away from the chord and the scale. You don't even have to remember it as chord degrees or scales or anything like that. Just be like, all right, there's the 4 chord, the 5 chord is 2 frets higher, but now I have what's called a flat 7. So now I have 10, 9, 10, A, D, G. And that's a G7 chord, right? So let's just take these two as examples of how to maybe replace that C major to an A minor to an F major 7 to a G7. Instead of. So it kind of gives a different type of vibe. And now I don't want you to think of these as just total replacements. They should just be options that you can go to maybe build the dynamic of a song. Because one thing that happens a lot is, especially in modern music, is it'll be the same chord progression for the verse and the chorus. It doesn't change, but if you're doing an acoustic arrangement or you're trying to accompany somebody, I think it really helps to know a lot of these little tricks and these different kind of alternate voicings of chords, because then you can make it a lot more interesting instead of just being like C to A to F to G over and over again throughout the entire song. One thing you can do is palm mute those chords to kind of get like a volume dynamic. And then when it gets to the big part of the song, open it up. But that's only going to do so much. Maybe for the verses, you want to go C, A minor, C, A minor. And then for another part, then you kind of have just bigger open chord voicings, right? So we just talked a little bit about the major chords in any key. I want to do something for the minor chords too, right? So that just brings us to taking the C major, running it all the way to F major. And real quick, just while we're talking about these two chords, C and F, I think an acoustic version, an acoustic voicing of this that I always like to use is having your ring finger on the low E string 3rd fret, pinky on the A string 3rd fret, middle finger 2nd fret on the D string to get this C/G chord where you have the G in the bass. I just think that works really well to kind of fill out the acousticness of it, and it's something that I always find myself using, right? But we're skipping over a couple chords here. When we go from C to F, what are the notes in the C scale, or just essentially the alphabet between C and F? C, D, E, F. So we have a D and an E that we're kind of jumping over, right? So the great thing about most guitars is they have dots on the odd numbered frets. That's going to show you where your D and your E are. So C, D, E, F, 3, 5, 7, 8. If you want more tips and tricks like this, definitely check out my Patreon where I go through everything from your first beginner lesson ever to playing some of the most fire songs that I will link in the description. C, D, E, F, right? We can make all these major chords, C major, D major, E major, F major, G major. You know, you could, hey, get creative. Be super major, exceptionally major is what you could do with those chord voicings. But generally, staying within a key, as most songs do, you want to have major chords mixed up with minor chords, right? So we've got C major, D major, E major to F major, okay? So basically all it is it's the exact same thing. You take a root note, but instead of going diagonal 1, like you want from 3A to 2D, we're going to go diagonal 2. Because a minor chord is what's called a flat third, regular third, major third, flat third. So now we have this kind of 2 fret spacing. And we can do that on both the D and the E. And then if you want to get that lower thing that we did, the 5th below, essentially, with the C and the F and the G, we do the same thing. And then have this be your new minor chord voicing, right? So here's the D. I know the 5th fret on the A string is my D note. I'm going to grab that 5th fret on the E string to thicken it up. And then I'm going to grab its minor 3rd fret on the D string. Now if I want to get the open strings too, interesting sound, right? I can go a step higher for the E. Maybe not as interesting a sound, but still sounds good because really that's just the E E minor now, an interesting voicing of an E minor. Okay? And we're using this to get all the way up to an F, a G, and then eventually an A. The 12th fret on the A string is A. So right there we've got C major, a D minor-ish thing, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and then we take it all the way back to C if you want. But using this kind of open chord thing for just chords in the key of C, I think really creates different and interesting chord voicings that, again, are just as easy, if not easier, because we're going up the neck. The distance between the frets is actually getting smaller. So a lot of times it'll be less of a reach to do it that way. And again, so if we just take C major, A minor, F to G, C major, A minor, F to G. We get to the D minor, E minor, F. Keep those open strings in there. D minor. And it just adds like a lot of variation, a lot of stuff that, you know, you just may just be seeing in a different thing. And I really think that connecting that C to that F specifically is a really great place to start. Because a lot of times we spend an inordinate amount of time in the first 4 frets of the guitar, and like most people ignore a lot of the other stuff, specifically acoustic guitar players. We're really kind of just getting this guy right here, F major 7, F major 9. However you want to look at it, just whatever, your new F chord voicing that looks exactly like a C chord, and utilizing the open string to help it sound kind of interesting, kind of quirky. It's a great place to start, right? And then we can start branching off from here. It's just kind of getting some kind of point further down the neck to start launching. So, and then again, if you want to use different kind of interesting scales and chord voicings, go for it. But getting in the habit of moving and the interval, be like, all right, I know 2.5 steps is gonna feel and sound like this. The 1 to the 4 chord is gonna sound like that in order. Because staying in one area, you definitely do get an idea of like what the sound of a 1 chord to a 4 chord sounds like. But going in a linear way like this, I think is maybe an even more beneficial way to do it for your ear. Just my opinion. Please feel free to disagree with me in the comments. So, that's all I've got for you today. Definitely thanks for checking it out. Make sure to check out the Patreon if you haven't already. And then if you have any questions, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, Twitter, or the website. Talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot.